Today we're going to make traditional Scottish shortbread. It is tender and buttery and crunchy and has that perfect texture that like melts in your mouth but still kind of stays and has like substance. And you can make it in large batches and it stores wonderfully. So you can just kind of store it at room temperature between sheets of parchment or wax paper in a sealed container for months, and it just, honestly, it just gets better. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to hit the subscribe button below and click the bell icon to be notified every time I post a new and delicious recipe. Okay, let's get into it. So there's not much going on here. We only have 5 ingredients. One of them is salt. So let's just take 2 seconds to like go through why we're using each one of these, because it's kind of important. So they say that traditional Scottish shortbread has a combination of rice flour and AP flour, so that is what I'm using. Just regular standard AP and rice flour. Just know that rice flour does go bad and the flavor does kind of become a little off over time, especially if your place is, I don't know, half as warm as mine. So, you know, just know that and make sure you can store it in the fridge, that helps. But there's that, okay. And then we're using caster sugar. And all the Americans out there are like, say what? Exactly, I know. It's just really extra fine sugar. So it is possible that you have access to extra fine caster sugar, and that's phenomenal. And you're already there. But if you don't, do not stress, because all you have to do is food process or blend regular standard granulated sugar, and then it becomes extra fine and you have yourself some caster sugar. So anyways, so that's how you make caster sugar. And we are going to use caster sugar instead of confectioner's sugar because it does add a nicer flavor. It gives it a little bit more, let's see, there's like a little bit more texture to it. It's just, it's a really subtle difference, and you can 100% make it with 10x or confectioner's sugar, but the flavor, the texture and the flavor will be slightly different. So you want to get, you know, good old-fashioned Scottish shortbread, a certain brand, not going to mention it. Caster sugar is your friend. We've got kosher salt to balance all the sweetness, bring out those flavors, which, let's be honest, are just sugar and butter. And then that brings us to our butter, which should be room temperature, but you know me, and it is not room temperature. So our first step here, which we're finally going to get to, is to hit our butter with a blowtorch. It does help with the combination of the ingredients, and it's just, it actually does make a difference. But all those small little choices are going to make a difference in your final recipe. Like when you're working with a recipe that only has 4 or 5 ingredients, you know, everything matters, right? So we're gonna turn this up, we're gonna hit a blowtorch. Oh, I forgot. Dang it, I forgot that I didn't charge my blowtorch. It's a really bad day for me. I think the good news is that it's really warm in here. So I think that actually just a little time in my bowl is gonna be enough to get this. Maybe a little hand warm. Wow, really grasping at straws here. I could also refill my torch. All right, we are looking beautiful. It's silky smooth, there's no lumps in there. Obviously it sat on the counter even just the 5 minutes that it took. It's that warm in here, so it's gonna be a good day, guys. All right, so we are just gonna add everything else, okay, without further ado. So we've got our AP flour here, which we already spoke about. Rice flour. This is obviously our caster sugar. And our kosher salt. So we are gonna use the cut-in method here. So we're just cutting in with kind of room temperature, cold, pliable butter. And all that's gonna do is help it kind of work in faster. It's still gonna take a minute. So we're gonna go ahead and just kind of let this go. Meanwhile, preheat your oven to 275 regs. And you know, maybe like find a fork or piece of parchment. You know, busy yourself. Okay, so she looks like crumbly. She looks like clumpy sand and wet sand, if you will. And that's nice, but she needs to keep going because we're not stopping here. There are no liquids in this. It is just butter holding everything together. Isn't that what dreams are made of? Yes. Okay. Before this gets too committed to its final shape, aka comes together completely, I just want to scrape the sides and make sure that there's no butter just like lurking, because you don't want streaks of butter in your corn, or what? You don't want streaks of butter in your cornbread either. You don't want streaks of butter in your shortbread. You know, you want everything to be completely coated, and you don't want, because that's gonna bake weird. And there's, you know, no room for baking weirdness here. I know it sounds funny, but like you want to give it the time it needs to come together. So part of that, like the moisture, this is going to sound super weird too, but the moisture in the butter is actually hydrating your flour, and that's, you know, helping to kind of, I mean, the fat is also being a binder, but it's like, that's helping to kind of pull everything together. That's what's going to give you that nice, beautiful, tender shortbread that melts in your mouth. So if you rush this process and then you've got little bits of dry flour, especially rice flour, you know, that's going to affect the final texture and flavor. Okay, in our bowl, we have got, everything is kind of chunking together. You get kind of like sheets that form on the side. They kind of come in and then they like break apart because, well, it's the paddle attachment. So hold up. So we've got our beautiful shortbread dough in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of gather it into, I'm just like pushing it together into a ball, if you will, in the mixer bowl. I'm just scraping off all the sides with the dough so I don't have to dirty another utensil. You know me, how I feel about dishes. Okay, so we've got ourselves a nice clean bowl. We've got ourselves a beautiful packet of dough here. Oh, I mean, this is just some gorgeousness. And then we'll grab our baking sheet, which we've lined with parchment paper. And we're just gonna press this down. So you could do this in any shape that you want. I'm gonna make kind of, you know, the traditional kind of sticks. And so the first step to that is kind of getting it to be about a ½ inch thick. And then you want it to be a square, a rectangle. So, you know, you wanna kind of just get it there. Now I want to make sure that I think about kind of the size that I want this to be. So, I mean, it really doesn't matter what size you make them. So you can make these any size you choose, but do think about what size you want them before you bake them. So if I want each of mine to be about 3½ inches, then I need to get it a little bit, which is good because this is a little chubs over here. So we're just going to get it a little bit longer. Now, these won't spread a ton, they should not. That's part of why we're baking them the way we are. I'm gonna make this a little wider because I do know that the kind of the sides just go a little bit. And so I want to make sure that I have enough to get 8 1-inch pieces. This is where I get a little persnickety, a little pastry chef on you, and we're gonna kind of like, I'm just gonna true up our edges. Now, if we care about this, which we don't, but you can kind of press out those kind of finger marks that I have on there. It's not that serious. So we are going to go ahead and kind of pre-mark where we want it, and then we're going to poke it. So you don't have to pre-mark it, you can just poke it willy-nilly, but since I already said that I care, I'm going to try and be conscientious about where I am poking it. So I've got myself a fork. You could do this with whatever you'd like. And we're just gonna take, you know, the fork tines and just, you know, poke them down and just make a nice, theoretically, straight line. My hand has other ideas about today, apparently. So that's fine. All right, we have poked our shortbread. we have preheated our oven. We have, you know, said a little blessing over it, and now we're gonna pop it in. So it's gonna bake for about 45 minutes. I know. And this is only if you want like perfect shortbread cuts. So we're gonna take it out after 45 minutes, and then we are gonna cut it. We're gonna put it back on the sheet tray, and then we are going to, we're gonna bake it again at 300 degrees, so a little bit hotter for 30 to 40 minutes until it's, you know, it's done. So it starts to kind of brown, and so we're gonna go ahead and pop this in. Right, so we have our shortbread. It is baked about 45 minutes, just a little bit over actually. And so it's obviously hot. I'm gonna go ahead, before we cut this, I'm gonna go ahead and just turn up my oven to 300. And we are going to cut this. Now, this is only if you care about having perfect cuts. If you do not, then you do not have to worry about this. Be careful, tray is hot. And so we are just gonna basically true up our edges. You don't have to do that. Again, this is your call. Now, it is not advisable to take this off of the tray while it's still warm, because it will break and crack. So just be aware. All right, so we're gonna do about an inch. Cut them about an inch wide. Okay, now we are going to spread out all the pieces. Do it with your knife. I'm gonna get a little tiny offset, just, you know. So all you're gonna do is kind of like gently put them in their own space. And this is just so that they cook more evenly. And of course, you know, they're all the same amount of done. You don't need to like, they don't need to be pretty on here. It's not like they're gonna spread anymore. They just, you know, they just need some room to breathe. We've done it. Now, these are gonna go back in our oven, which has made it to 300 in that time that it took me to cut those, which is not shocking, because it took a while. And we're gonna pop these back in, and then we're gonna bake them another 30, 40 minutes to an hour. It really depends, like you really want them to be fully baked. And so that's part of why we kind of cut and separate them, so that you give them a chance to be fully baked. And you know, you just want to see a little bit of browning like on the bottom, and then they're going to kind of look kind of dry and set, and they're not going to feel doughy, because they still kind of feel a little doughy right now. And you could always just like taste one. All right, and they're out. So they baked 25 additional minutes at the 300 until they're like the light golden brown that you can see here. It's easier to see it kind of on this, like on the bottom. You see how it's nice golden brown, and that's what you want. And so now we just let them cool, otherwise they're gonna be soft. So we have to let them cool, and they're gonna crisp up and be ready. It's time to try. I am super stoked, can't wait. Love shortbread. It is just something about like the buttery simpleness of it that's just so comforting and wonderful, and like you have to reach for another piece, you know? It's like you don't really have an option, almost. So I'm stoked to have my first piece of the day. Let's see. I'm gonna choose an ugly piece, just a dud, just because like they don't get any love over there. You know, bite into it without further ado. A really big bite that I just took. Sure was. It's crunchy and tender and like melts in your mouth, but still has like staying power. So you just are like, your whole palate is covered with this like buttery, like slightly sweetened. It's not overly sweet. It's more of a like a savory, rich, buttery shortbread. It's just, oh, Scottish shortbread. It's too early for dessert. Coffee.